How's it going, everybody? I hope your Monday is going super great. Today, we are going to be talking about a couple things. Oh boy, I don't want to do it. You see him back there. I hate, I don't know. I like having the TV back there, but it's just sometimes I look in the monitor. I'm like, oh crap, it's that guy. He's right behind me. What am I supposed to do? Well, today we're going to be talking about Doug Wilson, and the whole world was happy, right? Actually, no. Despite a lot of you who are actually passionate about this channel and enjoy my content, you guys like it when I talk about Doug Wilson. Everyone else does not. And they let me know. They let me know through different avenues and everything, but we're talking about him again because this time it's hitting home for me. All right, we're going to be talking about some Canadian influence that he's had here and some articles that are being written now. And honestly, it's just a huge whopping shame. We're going to talk about some of the SBC stuff. Last week, we did a full dive through what's at stake for the SBC at the annual meeting, which apparently started today. Tomorrow is when everything actually gets kicked off. Today is supposed to be the pastors' conference. But wow, it was mostly about the executive committee and one big decision, actually two big decisions that they made. We'll be talking about both of those here in a little bit. We'll visit the penalty box and then we'll call it a day, but that's in a while. But first, I want to say hi to some folks who are in the chat. I want to say hi to Pam. Pam is here and says, let's go. Answering Adventism. I don't know why I said that weird. I spot the MXPX album, top left. Excellent. It's right over there now. It's I try to move things around the set just to keep things a little bit interesting. But yeah, I grew up on MXPX. I have a signed shirt. Oh, I should go into my storage and find that. I have a signed shirt from all the guys. We got David who's saying, Dean, have you ever smelt Updog? Because I said something about underdogs and he's David. No. What are you talking? I don't even know that. I don't have pets. I hope that's not anything really bad. David, the other David. What's up, family? Hope everyone is doing well. We got Examining Doug Wilson in Moscow. Whenever you talk about Doug, here comes Examining Doug Wilson, and we appreciate everything that they're doing online. But they're always here for the Doug Wilson stuff, and I appreciate that. Pam was also saying, what are we thinking? Or what are we thanking Doug Wilson for? I can't for the life of me think of a reason to thank him. Well, it's sarcastic. It's sarcastic. Let's start getting into it. All right. Here's the deal. I live in Canada, and you would think that most of the things that happen in the United States, both politically and, just in general, wouldn't have that much of an effect on me. Now, I am an American citizen. It's where I was born, where I spent most of my life. I've only been up here for a couple years. But, wow, have I seen the effect that U.S. religion and politics has on Canada. It's insane. It's insane the amount of influence that the United States has. Not really through any kind of military action like other places around the world, just through TV, through just having media. It's insane. Well, here's the deal. We're going to be talking, and maybe some of these people are already here. But we're going to be talking about the Trinity Bible Chapel guys over in Ontario and their influence that they are beginning to have in Canada. And the reason why is because they've been so heavily influenced by Doug Wilson. Now, again, this hits home for me in a couple different ways. First off, it's Canada. There's always just a level of, I'm just far away. I'm far away from most of the things that we talk about. So there's a little bit of just physical distance that creates an emotional distance a little bit. And it's here. It's here, and it's having an effect in churches that I know. And then also, I'm no stranger to Trinity Bible Chapel. Back in the day, when I was pastoring up in Saskatoon, which, again, I always have to say, it's a real place. Don't make fun of it. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan is a real place. It's the biggest city here in my province. And so when I was pastoring there, we were dealing with similar issues. We were struggling with similar things, and we had a lot more in common back then. And so I was actually friendly with these guys, and I would have considered them friends, even online friends. So I just want that being said. The reason why I'm talking about this is because it has an impact on me, both because it's Canada, but also because I do have connections there with Trinity Bible Chapel, and also because I've talked a little bit about their stuff before. We talked about the Antichrist documentary and the war on Antichrist conference that they had over there. That was all really pushed by Trinity Bible Chapel and their pastor, Jacob Rome. Now, if those guys are watching, I just want to say, I'm going to try to treat you guys fairly. So don't get too upset at me too fast. All right. Listen to what I have to say. And, I don't think any of this is going to surprise anybody. Because obviously I'm no fan of Doug Wilson. I've said it many times here on the channel. A lot of you guys actually are here because of that, at least for the passionate people who hop into the chat and like the videos and have subscribed to the channel. You guys know what I'm about. And for all those people who do watch, who do pay attention to every single one of my videos, but they don't hit the like button and they don't, interact, but they do watch and they hate watch. This isn't going to surprise you. I'm not happy with what I saw. And what I saw was not from Gospel Coalition Canada. It wasn't from Christianity Today talking about stuff going on in Canada. It wasn't from some Christian institution. Instead, we got to hear about the influence that Doug Wilson is having at Trinity Bible Chapel through CBC. Now, CBC is a news outlet here in Canada, reputable news outlet. I know what some of you guys say. I know, if you're Canadian and you're conservative and have been very political over the last couple years, I know what you say about the CBC. It's reputable. Well, they decided to do somewhat of an expose on Trinity Bible Chapel. And so let's just take a look at this. We're going to skip some words because of YouTube. And, some people get mad at me about that, but, get your own YouTube channel and you can skip whatever words you want. You could read, can't you? It's right here. If you're listening to the podcast, so sorry. Inside the fundamentalist Christian movement that wants to remake Canadian politics. Internal documents reveal the ambitions of anti-group that is part of populist movement. And so this is Trinity Bible Chapel in Waterloo, Ontario, and it says it's one of the most prominent churches in a fundamentalist Christian movement that has gained momentum in Canada since the pandemic began. Now, I know that, all right, I don't know if that's people making fun of it or Joshua Peck. I don't know if you're being serious or what, but I'm expecting we're going to get some of those kinds of people into the chat today. Just seems to happen if there's any moderators, just look out in the chat. I can't pay attention to everything. I'll try. All right. So I want to say a couple things right off the bat. It is odd to me to see this printed in a newspaper thing or in any kind of news outlet that Trinity Bible Chapel is a fundamentalist Christian, as part of a fundamentalist Christian movement. Trinity Bible Chapel used to be, I'll put it that way, people will be mad at me. It's all right. They don't talk to me anymore anyways. Used to be Reformed. And a lot of folks kind of found each other. There was this thing that happened a couple years back, and people get mad at me when I bring this up too. Guys, believe me, people get real mad at me about some of the stuff that we talk about just by me stating this is what happened. Like all of a sudden, it's like the worst thing in the world for some people. But a couple years ago, we got into this thing where we were all of a sudden just talking about what's his name, big church guy, had Bruxy Cavey over at the Meeting House in Ontario and Quebec, and you probably know about Bruxy Cavey because of all the news, like last year with abuse and sexual sins and just like a whole bunch of nasty garbage. And there, that's what he's known for now, but he was known for being like the guy who didn't believe in penal substitutionary atonement and was claiming to still be like orthodox, and it's a whole deal. And so back in the day, Gospel Coalition did this conversation with him, and I stand by it. I'm sorry, people at Gospel Coalition, I like you guys, but you guys always get mad at me when I say that what happened. I think it's very clear that Gospel Coalition Canada, they had this conversation with him, and they pushed him over. Like I don't know if they were trying to bring him into the camp or whether just explain that he is who he is, like explain his theology. But it came across to a lot of pastors like me, like Jacob, like a lot of other pastors that they were trying to say that this guy is someone to have in our camp and to not be, so I don't know, wary of. They're just concerned about him. And so with that kind of rallied some people. And a lot of us found each other through that, of writing blogs. I wrote a blog that got some traction about Bruxy Cavey and his views. And I had some of these people from Trinity Bible Chapel reaching out, and we had some communications, and there were a bunch of different pastors, like I said, who just kind of found each other. And so with that, like it's kind of heartbreaking. I'll say it that way. It's not like we were best buddies forever, and that's not what I'm saying. I don't want to misrepresent our relationship, but it is just kind of like sad for me to see fundamentalist on here, because that is not the church that I came to know through Jacob and through his sermons and from other people that I talked to at the church there. But since then, a lot has changed. The world has changed. And this church, along with several others, really spearheaded the whole, Christians are being persecuted in Canada narrative. And, because you had two pastors that were arrested for violating the health restrictions. And regardless of what you believe about that, it's unfortunate that it happened. I'll put it that way, and I'll leave it there. I've talked about it so many times. You can go back and watch any of my other stuff. But this whole thing now of being called a fundamentalist, I think it actually fits now, because they have drawn lines on things and called people like me, not specifically me, at least not that I know of, but people like me, they've called false pastors, hired hands. That we're not real Christians, that we're not following Christ, that we're in disobedience to Christ, all this stuff for following health restrictions and all of that back in the day. And they still want to hold to those lines. That's why they won't give up. You're seeing stuff about like, oh, what was it? Was it Christianity Today that did the article of we need to, just forgive each other? And like people got mad at Christianity Today for saying Christians need to forgive each other. Like, it's low bar for being upset these days. But it is a fundamentalist church. They've drawn lines where the gospel doesn't, and about not just about like who you're going to have fellowship with and who you can like do things with, but on who is faithful and not faithful, and whether they're even Christians or not. So I would consider them a fundamentalist church at this point. All right. On a recent Sunday morning in Waterloo, Ontario, Pastor Jacob Rome gripped a lectern and issued a warning to his congregation. Jacob is a pretty fiery preacher. Yeah, so that's not abnormal. Christless existence leads to the dark, hopeless abyss of death. He told around 200 people at Trinity Bible Chapel, an evangelical church on the outskirts of the city. Much of the sermon delivered last December was devoted to a student at a Christian university. I don't mean to be disrespectful, by the way. I'm very concerned about YouTube and different words that you say and whether they're going to hold things against you. So, again, if you want to say those words, you can have your own videos. All right. Christian University in nearby Hamilton, who had died by ultimate form of self-harm a few weeks earlier. If you're going to live a lie to the point where you're willing to mutilate your own body, it's going to send you into dark despair, Rome said. Now, for a lot of people, they're going to look at this and say, like, what's wrong? What's wrong with some Christian having an extreme form of belief? I don't think it's necessarily like I'm talking about like legal and illegal kind of deal about like wrong and right in this scenario. But I don't think that, saying something like that after, a student at a Christian university does that to himself. One, I don't think it's pastoral to put it that way. And then also, like, I do think that someone has the right to say that, though. But again, I don't know if that's really what they're trying to get at, whether this person should be allowed to say that. I think they're trying to build up a narrative of who Jacob is and the church is. He then used a slur to refer to certain people. I don't know what that slur was, and they don't say it. Trinity Bible is one of the most prominent churches in a fundamentalist Christian movement that has gained momentum in Canada, initially by challenging pandemic public health restrictions. This movement is now increasingly involved in electoral politics, advocating for conservative social and political policies based on literal interpretations of the Bible. What does that sound like to you? To me, it sounds like Christian nationalism, right? And I've talked a lot about the U.S. with people like Stephen Wolfe and William Wolfe and a lot of wolves, which I just got to say, if like wolves are really like leading your movement, maybe that's a bad sign. I don't know, call me traditional, but wolves, probably want to stay away from the wolves. But I didn't think that we'd all have that conversation too much up here because things are very different between the U.S. and Canada as far as religious freedom. It looks very different. We do have religious freedom, but it is not, I don't know, what's the phrase? Carte blanche, where it's just whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. It's not exactly that. There are certain things that you can and can't say in a public sphere. Now, should it be that way? That's a debate, but it is. It is that way. And as Christians, which I know they get so mad when I talk about Paul and Romans and submitting to the governing authorities, but it's true. There are ways that we can talk about our faith that aren't going to disrupt the government and still be orthodox and faithful to what the Bible says with a certain tone. Really, that's all that's different, is the tone that you use to be able to communicate truths. Well, the tone from this church, from these movements, has been extremely harsh. Harsh to the point where, again, they're calling out other Christians and saying like they're not even Christians and stuff like that. It's extreme. It's extremism. And now they're moving that extremism into politics up here, not in the States, up here. Just nuts to me. But here we go. So this is Jacob Rome. This is their pastor at Trinity Bible Chapel in Waterloo, Ontario, speaking at a 2021 event in Waterloo Town Square. This image is taken from a video uploaded to the church's Facebook page and to their Tumblr was the website. What's the really conservative one? Is it Rumble? It sounded right. All right. Liberty Coalition Canada. It's crazy that we're talking about them. All right. Liberty Coalition Canada, conservative Christian advocacy group, is trying to raise 1.3 million to recruit hundreds of Christian politicians and campaign staff to run out at all levels of government. In a document marked Please Keep Classified that was obtained by CBC News, the group says its ultimate goal is the most powerful political disruption in Canadian history. The government doesn't like that. Like, what is that? Like, I'm sure what they intended to say and mean by that is very different from how it would come across to like just secular people. But that sounds like you're wanting to like overthrow, right? Like that's a pretty bad thing to just get out there. The most powerful political disruption in Canadian history. So let me talk about Liberty Coalition Canada for a sec. This is a very small organization. Again, everything that you like, most of my viewers are from the United States, so I'm going to focus on you guys. Everything that you view with Christianity, like, understand that that is not how it is everywhere else around the world, even up here. Now, we're probably closer than a lot of other places around the world, just obviously geographically, but just like the way it works. Um, but we don't have the institutions that the United States does. We don't have huge denominations like the Southern Baptist Convention that has a lot of influence. There's none of that up here. All the circles are smaller, and the amount of Christians is dramatically smaller here in Canada. That's why I came up here. That's why we decided to move up here in what was it, 2016, and go into ministry here because there was a need for that, and there still is. There's probably even more of a need now. But like, so I just want you to understand when you think of like, oh, what is this coalition? Understand that we're talking about a very small group with a very limited source of resources for them to be able to use to accomplish these things. So raising 1.3 million is probably, that's a huge ask for this institution for all their donors. Okay. Working alongside Liberty Coalition Canada are dozens of churches. So not hundreds, dozens of churches across the country, a number of small media outlets, which I would probably just say it's probably just one. Like, it's probably just Rebel News, which is basically a bunch of, I don't want to be mean, but this is what I think. Okay, this is my channel. I'm just giving my opinion. Again, I'm not an expert, but from looking at stuff, they just look like a whole bunch of people with decent cameras and bad microphones running around and getting interviews with people and reporting news about conservative things up here. You could think of them like a watered down version of Fox News, or even like the Blaze, but they don't have sets, or at least their sets don't look good. I'm just saying. I got a lot of shade that I could throw at these people, but I'm trying to be nice. But that's probably the only institute, like the news organization that they're probably talking about. But small media outlets, and at least one well-funded think tank. I don't know what that is, as far as like who's in that. While theological and political differences exist among them, many supporters of this movement share a vocal opposition of rights and other social justice causes. Several. We are going to have to pause this. Let me mute this. So sorry. Sorry about that. I thought that was the number for my kid's school, because I am currently also looking at my son's insulin levels, his blood sugar levels, and It's a little bit lower than I would want, and so I thought that's what it was, but it's not. And he's doing okay. He's jumping up a little bit, as I can see it right now. I have it open all the time. It's a new thing. So sorry about that interruption. And it was just a telemarketer. So, all right, let's keep on moving. Sorry about that. Several Canadian pastors in the movement also have ties to a controversial branch of evangelical Christianity in the U.S. known as Reconstructionism. Now, when they're talking about Reconstructionism, it's very similar. They're even going to say linked to Christian nationalism. And I think that's actually closer to what they're talking about. Like, they're going to get into Rushdoony and like all that kind of stuff, but I think it's more focused on what you're currently seeing in the U.S. with Christian nationalism. It's slightly different. All right. And I don't have time to get into the differences between them, but I'm just going to say it's slightly different. Scholars say Reconstructionist ideals often linked to Christian nationalism, the idea that the United States is a Christian country, are influencing how some Canadian evangelicals are responding to issues like legalized that marriage and added protections for gender minorities. So some Christians in Canada over the last 10 years have begun to push back, said John Stackhouse, professor of religious studies at Crandall University in Moncton, New Brunswick. And pastors are defying pandemic rules. So they go back and they talk about, all these pastors. You can see here nearly 300 mostly Protestant churches and organizations across Canada, including Trinity Bible, signed the declaration, a declaration of the Niagara Declaration, which, if you don't know, is that's probably a good reason why you don't know. Like, is only 300, and I will say they say churches and organizations, but it could be pretty much anything. I don't think there was like that much of a bar you had to meet to be able to sign that. One of our concerns over the past couple of years is the apparent power grab by the state to exercise absolute authority over all life, said Aaron Rock, Dr. Aaron Rock, as he likes to put on Twitter, one of the authors of the petition and pastor at Harvest Bible Church in Windsor, Ontario. So, and then you can see Rock declined to be interviewed in person or over the phone. He spoke to CBC News by exchanging voice memos with a journalist. All right, let me explain a little bit. All right, so not many churches, not many pastors went against health restrictions during the pandemic here. Not many. That's why only 2 were jailed, and some received fines. And Trinity Bible Chapel was one of those churches that received quite a bit of fines. But also Aaron Rock with his church, Harvest, there in Ontario and Windsor. But the thing about these guys is that they all use the internet. And they all decided to be as public as they could about violating these restrictions. And I understand that they had motive in that to try to push the needle and to make it so that everyone could, if they wanted to kind of be like that spearhead of that movement, and to, be the pressure point of, all right, yeah, we're going to have the pressure put on us so that other people don't have to. I think that was some of the motivation. But now I'm beginning to see that I don't think it was the only motivation. And again, I don't talk about motivations that much here on my channel. But this time I'm going to, because it's become pretty clear to me from some of the things that have been said, some of the conferences, some of the rhetoric that's been used about other Christians, that these guys are trying to say like the same thing that John MacArthur said at the Shepherds Conference. We are the remnant. And it's ridiculous. There are, yes, the numbers are smaller here in Canada compared to the US, but there are so many Christians who love Jesus and are trying to serve faithfully. And I am sick and tired of guys like this, like Dr. Aaron Rock, who said it so many times. By the way, maybe I should have shown it. You can go back to another stream. I did show it, I think, in one past stream, how they were happy. At least Aaron Rock was happy to align with well-known cult leader Henry Hildebrandt. It's one of my most popular streams on this channel, talking about the Church of God Restoration And they were definitely trying to use social media and everything happening with the pandemic to push their theological agenda across of getting these people to be, just swept away into this cult. And Dr. Aaron Rock was happy to take pictures with Henry Hildebrandt and to be a part of, voicing their concerns and all of that. You have people like Stephen Richardson. You have a lot of people who were happy to join hands with a cult leader while saying that all these Christians were unfaithful. And, the rhetoric that's continued past then has been pretty dang similar. And I am sick and tired of Christians up here being maligned from these guys as if they're not faithful when all they were trying to do was to follow the government and serve Christ. And by following the government, serve Christ. They wanted to honor Jesus and how they represented themselves to the community. And they wanted to keep their flocks safe. It was a confusing time, and there are differences of opinions on all of it. I understand that. You might be watching this, even if you're not, one of the people that I'm sure these people watch. But maybe you're not even one of them, and you're just like, I totally disagree, Dean. That's fine. But let's be gentle with each other. Let's be loving with each other, and let's not use the same rhetoric that these guys have used. And so it's just frustrating to me to see this happening and to see them now being like, all right, well, we need to be the decision makers because the government is anti-Christ and we need to fight them. And they use that language. They put war on Antichrist, right? And they took John Bunyan's work, and I think they butchered it and decided that they were just going to use it as a prop to be able to fight their faux war. Are there real concerns that Christians should have had with the government at that time? Absolutely. I'm not saying you shouldn't have those, but there's a way that we act as Christians about those things and the way that we treat other Christians who have a difference of conscience. And they just refuse to do that. And they still are not holding back. They still are saying that we're unfaithful and all of that kind of stuff. And now they want to be the decision makers in the government. Oh, joy. So here we have the Liberty Coalition Canada. Again, a very small institution. I don't think anything's going to happen from this, but it's just so frustrating to see this on CBC. So where the state crossed the line for us was in the attempt to control ministry and worship of the Christian church, he added in a voice memo. So that's from Aaron Rock. Again, a lot I could say about that guy. All right. Thiessen, Rock, and Rome were among several pastors in Canada who were charged with defying public health rules by holding large gatherings at their churches in 2020 and 2021. Some of the charges against Rock were later withdrawn. But again, they were super public. I can tell you, I know pastors here in Saskatchewan who were out in the boonies and they just continued to meet because that was their conscience. And they didn't go to social media and say, look how faithful we are. And look at us. Everyone else, they might not even be Christians, but us, we're the faithful ones. They just met because that was their conscience. And while I disagree with them, that's up to them. That's between them and the Lord, and however the government would have acted on that. They didn't have to do it the way that these guys did it. Rome's church celebrated these pastors at an event in Waterloo, Ontario last fall called the Church at War Conference. That's what it was. Yeah. Not the war on Antichrist. Church at War, where governments were labeled as the Antichrist. Yeah. Yep. And we talked about that. As governments began to remove pandemic restrictions, Liberty Coalition Canada shifted its focus to controversies that pit progressives and conservative values against each other on issues ranging from gender and sexuality to racism and the environment. In recent months, the organization has emphasized its opposition to certain rights. It is raising money to support legal action brought by an Ontario high school student who was suspended for organizing a protest against his school's gender-neutral bathroom policy, who has since appeared at several anti-something demonstrations during a recent Liberty Coalition podcast episode. So people listen to this stuff, even if they don't have very many followers or subscribers or viewers. people listen. That's why I need to be careful about some of the things I say too. All right, but during a recent Liberty Coalition podcast episode, for example, a host referred to the certain worldview as satanic and a godless death cult. These guys. The host, Kingston, Ontario pastor Andrew DiBartolo, he must have been very surprised to see his name on CBC's website, said the Rainbow Mafia was seeking to brainwash children. His co-host, Matthew Halleck, described a certain perspective as sexual perversion. So my point is that, one, you got to be super dang careful about how you talk about these things. One, because they're people. Like these, like if you were talking to someone and even, if you have a very, like I am a conservative Christian, and I know like even talking about the Shiny Happy People documentary, there were some comments about like, oh, I'm getting, the vibe that you're this way, but no, I'm very conservative Christians. I believe in what I would call biblical sexual ethics. And for me, I still talk about it in a way that's kind. I try to be, at least. I'm not saying I'm perfect, and there are probably plenty of times where I've messed up. But I try to talk about these things in a kind way. You know why? Because people are listening. And these things aren't just like topics. It's not just like news bites and stories from afar. They're real people. They're real people I know. Maybe these people don't know because they've cut themselves off, but maybe they do know. Then why do you talk about them as godless death cults? Do you think that's going to be persuasive when you talk to people? Like with CBC, they see that and they just go like, what? Because one, they're not used to that kind of language. They're not used to like the King James only kind of language of, oh, the godless death cult. Like they're not used to seeing that. And it sounds so ridiculously harsh and, unloving, uncharitable in any way. And so they're just like, these people must hate these kinds of people. There are certain ways that we could talk about things as Christians that explain our strong, and we don't weaken our strong position on certain things, while also being loving and kind and compassionate and realizing that people are people. They're not their like sexual identity. I'm going to get myself in trouble because these people love to like twist your words, but they're real people. They're not just that one thing that you disagree with them about. They're so much more than that, and have a real conversation with people. But they're making a lot of Christians look bad. So shame on you guys. You're making us look bad. And just because you want to be as harsh as you can to gain a little bit more of a following, because again, extremism will always bring the extremes of certain sides over to your side. Like there's a magnetic response with extremism. You're going to get the people who agree, and they're going to be very passionate about that agreement. And you're going to gain a little bit of a following, but also you're going to push tons of people away. So that magnet goes both ways. All right. Now, like they get into a bunch of different things about, the pandemic and different things that are happening now. But, we put in the thumbnail. So let's talk a little bit about where this is coming from. Let's start right here. Through its podcast and fundraising efforts, Liberty Coalition Canada appears to be seeking a broader audience for Christian Reconstructionism. And I would just put in, I don't think they know the differences between them. I would just put in Christian nationalism. An austere form of evangelism that seeks inspiration from the Old Testament to guide modern government and culture to force the Old Testament law on the country. What you have with the Niagara Declaration is a form of Christian Reconstructionism, said Andre Gagne, a professor of theology at Montreal's Concordia University. In speeches and podcast appearances, Thiessen, the coalition's founder, often invokes thinkers Cornelius Van Til and concepts theonomy, presuppositionalism that are central to the Reconstructionist movement. No, they're not. Like this is the thing when news organizations do theology. That's not similar things sometimes, but no. He also participated in several events that are hosted by organizations and figures that experts associates with Reconstructionism. Stackhouse, the Crandall University professor, studies evangelical Christianity and estimates Reconstructionists account for a small minority of Canadian evangelicals. Yeah, it is very small. It's on the fairly strong right wing of Calvinism or Reformed Christianity. Look what you guys did. Thanks a lot. Like as if like any Reformed people here in Canada needed anything else that we have to defend ourselves on. Now we got to deal with this. They do not represent Reformed Christians in Canada. All right. Anyone who is listening, please, no. They do not. That is, but because they're so loud, they're going to be looked at as representing that. All right. Where is it? All right, here we go. So scholars usually trace the origins of Reconstructionism to R.J. Rushdoony, a religious thinker who rose to prominence in the U.S. in the 1970s. Rushdoony believed that modern societies should be organized around the Ten Commandments. He advocated capital punishment for a lot of things. His teachings had a profound influence on the Christian right. He is often credited with convincing other evangelical leaders in the U.S. of the need to oppose legalized deletion, launching the decades-long and ultimately successful effort to overturn Roe v. Wade. More recently, Reconstructionism in the U.S. is often associated with Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho, and its controversial pastor, Doug Wilson. Wilson preaches that one scholar has called extremely muscular Christianity. So dumb. Which champions traditional models of masculinity and calls on believers to build their own parallel society to avoid the evils of modern secular culture. Abandon the world. Abandon the world. Let's do our own thing. Let's build our own cities. Let's have our own government. And let's not have any influence whatsoever. That's how you lose your influence. They think that they gain influence that way, but they're going to lose it. In his most recent writing, Wilson has no qualms about describing his goal as theocracy, writes Crawford Gribben, professor of Queen's University, Belfast, in his 2021 book, Survival and Resistance. Wilson's ideal society, according to Gribben, would be run along biblical lines. That marriage and abortion would be illegal, men would be in charge, and women would be at home with the children where they belong. Just kidding. Wilson is also known for having romanticized slavery in his earlier writings. That's the nice way to put it. And denigrates the certain community. Last year, he called certain people mentally ill. His church in Moscow operates its own school system and has extensive publishing and media interests. Its stated goal is to make Moscow a Christian town. Now, you might be like, okay, but like, where's the connection? And I've talked about the connection before, so maybe you already know it. Members of the Liberty Coalition may not share their goal. That's being generous to them. But they have visited Moscow and do maintain ties with leaders of Wilson's church. The coalition's podcasts are hosted by a website run by members of the Christ Church community. Gabriel Wrench, a prominent member of the Christ Church community and host of Cross Politic, they didn't get that one, attended the Church at War conference at Trinity Bible. Rome, in turn, preached at Christ Church earlier this year. Did you catch that? Did you catch it? Jacob Rome of Trinity Bible Chapel, in turn, preached at Christ Church, Doug Wilson's church, earlier this year. Wilson has encouraged Canadian Christians to follow his lead. Jesus Christ commanded Christians in Canada to have as the direct object of all their missionary endeavors the evangelization and conversion of Canada, Wilson said in 2019. So the goal is for Canada to become Christian, and if you know your history, for Canada to become Christian again. And that's where they go with Rushdoony, because you're like, oh, okay, it was Christian, and now you want to re-Christianize it. And that's where they draw those conclusions. Here's the point. The point is that Doug Wilson's influence is just so big, and it sucks. Let's like, I'm not going to put it any more nuanced than that. It sucks that he has so much influence, and he can throw his weight around, and all these younger pastors. Jacob is around my age, and like, these pastors just flock to those voices, those extreme voices. And I mean, I know for a fact that the guys over at Trinity Bible Chapel have been impacted by Doug Wilson's stuff for far more than just the last couple of years. This is deep and ongoing. And now there's like direct connections. There's direct connections, and Doug Wilson is still continuing to talk about this Christian nationalism thing, and we need Christendom. And here, even when he talks about evangelizing, he talks about it, the conversion of Canada. And what he means by that is not the conversion of Canadians, but the conversions of the nation. He wants the whole nation, including the government, to be Christian. Now, again, as a Baptist, which Trinity Bible Chapel used to be Baptist. Jacob went to Southern, I think. But now it's just, no, we want to rule over the government, because when we rule over the government, that's Christ ruling over, as if that's the same thing. It's not. We're flawed people, and when we do something like that, we fail, and we've seen it throughout history. It's not going to work. Christian nationalism doesn't work, and yes, it is a small minority. I want to emphasize that. It looks bleak from this article, but they're trying to be sensational to get clicks and to be like, oh, watch out for these guys. But it is growing, but it's still dang small. When we talk about dozens of churches, like, we're probably talking about like 24, okay? But they are influential, and they have a big voice, and they have a large following, and now they're having the ear of people in other churches whose pastors are like, But now the people in the pews are beginning to get, like, radicalized by Jacob, by Aaron Rock, by some of these extreme voices who are radicalized by Doug Wilson. This is not red yarn conspiracy theory. This is just looking at the connections and being like, yep, he has influence on that guy, and that guy's having influence on those people. And I've heard from pastors that, even in my province, who are dealing with the influence of the Ezra Institute with Dr. Joe Boot, who's going around and having conferences about postmillennialism and all that stuff with Joel Webbin and James White and all those kinds of guys, Apologia. Like, it's its own group, and they are active, and they're having an actual effect on congregations. And it is so negative. It is not for Jesus. Like, they're being divisive, and they're being extreme, and no one else seems to be calling him out. So I guess I'm going to. And I'm glad the CBC wrote this. Now they're going to use it as like a Medal of Honor to be like, oh, liberal media coming at us again because we're Christians and they hate Christians. No. All right. It's not because they hate Christians. It's because you guys are acting so extreme. And you're using words that are going to get people's ears and just be like, wait, what? It's when they're... It's offensiveness for the sake of just gaining an audience, and not for saying what the Bible says, but saying it in a way that is offensive and draws that attention. And it's a real thing right now. And I know Jacob, other people that know me, and we've talked over the years, and maybe others who don't know me, but they know, like, the church there and what's happening in Canadian evangelicalism. I'm not saying like it's you need to shut down your ministry. I'm saying you need to change directions and start listening to other people. Doug Wilson is not, like, again, Federal Vision. You guys know this. Like, a lot of these guys are smart. They went to seminary. Like, look into these things. Don't just just because he's popular, just because he has influence, just because he's giving you some of that influence, don't become a mascot for Doug Wilson in Moscow. Don't be their little lapdog here in Canada, where you just get to, eat the scraps of Moscow and gain a little bit of a following. You're your own person. Start talking like it. Get back to the things that actually matter. Talk about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Share the gospel with people. And I know that these people will say, well, of course we're doing that. Are you saying we're not? I'm saying focus on that. Let's keep focus on the big thing. Stop acting like you're going to take over the country when you know you're not, so that when you guys fail, you can be like, oh, we need to get out of here. Like, enough of this stuff. I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. I'm thankful that CBC actually talked about it. All right. Let's hit up another piece of news. That was depressing. Honestly, I was expecting to talk about that for 20 minutes. It's frustrating. All right, let's deal with this because the annual meeting kind of got started today for the Southern Baptist Convention, where they're needing to talk about abuse. That's what they need to focus on, but they're not focusing on it. And we talked about that last week and several times in the last couple of weeks. But they're talking about Rick Warren. They're talking about female pastors. They're talking about, wokeism and, all this stuff. And it doesn't really matter as much. And today, they had their executive committee meeting, which is like the highest branch, if you will, of their Baptist polity, where they make decisions that do have a direct impact on the convention as a whole, and as the convention on a whole through then to local churches. So it's like this funnel system of authority. And, it's kind of breaking autonomy in a way, but we don't break autonomy. We don't want a database. Anyways, they voted in somebody. Philip Robertson was voted in as the SBC Executive Committee chairman. And that is one of the most powerful positions in the Southern Baptist Convention. Now, why it matters is, he's a pastor. He's trained theologically. He seems to be a very intelligent man. But the problem is that he is also deeply involved with the Conservative Baptist Network. And the Conservative Baptist Network has not made, they haven't been quiet about it. They are making as much noise as possible, talking about how the SBC is in this liberal drift, and if we don't change our ways, we're going to have to figure something out. In other words, we're going to have to leave. And so there's just a lot going on. So for Philip Robertson to be voted in, and it was like 36-34, and they needed 41 votes to become chairman. And the guy who was non-Conservative Baptist Network. So basically you have these two sides, those who would agree with the Conservative Baptist Network and those who were just, normal SBC pastors, and don't see like that woke liberal drift as much. Well, that guy dropped out, even though he had more votes. He didn't want to be divisive. And so he dropped out. And next thing you know, the Conservative Baptist Network guy is in charge. This is a horrible thing. Like, I know it sounds like it's just so petty and everything, but like with what needs to be addressed at this convention and what could be like the narrative that happens at this convention, this to me is like a huge red flag that nothing is going to be done at the Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting. Like as far as abuse goes and dealing with things and holding people accountable, it's just not going to happen. I mean, like if this is where things are leading, I have zero confidence that anything is going to happen. That sucks because it really needs to. Now, a couple other things happen. One of which was this thing right here. I got that error message right here. Oh no, did that go away? I need to see that. Oh snap. Let's go options. I need my Windows. Where's the overlays? All right, I got it back. Ignore this. And now, all right, that was a lot. Okay, we're not going to read this whole thing, but I just wanted it on the screen to be able to talk about it. But this is a resolution or a recommendation. There's so many different words with this stuff. Basically, this pastor out in Virginia came up with this statement that he wants voted on for the convention, where they will not hire any woman as any kind of pastor. And this was voted on today by the executive committee, and they voted to bring it to the floor. Now, the problem with this is the wording, because, like, again, I get people mad at me. Sorry, but this is where I stand. I am of the mind that only qualified men can be local church pastors. And that's been the position, at least as a whole, for the Southern Baptist Convention. And now they're putting it into exact wording. And this is going to be voted on. Now, this goes hand in hand with Rick Warren and him getting ousted, and he's appealing that, and he wants to be able to stay in the Southern Baptist Convention. So that's going to be something. But also, this comes as, the Conservative Baptist Network. They're ready to leave over this stuff, or at least they're saying similar sentiments. But this is going to be a linchpin. And the wording I'm concerned about, because they can't hire any woman as any pastor. And there are going to be churches that are going to be confused by that. And I think that might be on purpose. What about a church that has a children's pastor and they have a woman as a children's pastor? Even though I would say you shouldn't use that wording for it. And I would say you need to be probably calling this person a director. Because again, I do believe qualified male elders, not just males, qualified male elders, but they're going to be confused on that. And there are going to be people who are upset about it and might not vote in the way that people would think, because they don't understand the wording and what the implications of it. And there are going to be other people who are mad about the implications of those words. And so they're going to vote the other way. And really what this is a grenade. This is a grenade that was just thrown onto the I need to be careful because this is the internet about my expressions. Okay. This is going to be something that's going to be frustrating and going to cause a lot of tension there on the floor at the annual meeting. And I think this is going to be the main thing that's going to be discussed. This and Rick Warren, and I think that's probably it. And everything else is going to get swept under the rug again. So not good. Not good things happening. Then there was also, there was another thing that happened at this behind closed doors meeting that we have a few journalists in. Thank God for that. But they talked about how Joe Knott, who is honestly, like, every time I hear anything from him, I'm like, this guy is a pastor. I don't understand. Now, I don't know him personally, but some of the things that this guy has said, wow. And he is very much for the Conservative Baptist Network. Well, he decided that he was going to try to get some things passed where it's just not good. I don't want to get into the weeds about it. Maybe I'll do another video about it. I need to get going here. But it's just a lot of things happening in the Southern Baptist Convention where you're just like, really? This is happening? Why? Why is this happening right before they're supposed to be dealing with the actual problem, which is abuse? And there's, like, to me, it's people are trying to make it so they just don't. And I'm becoming very concerned. Now, I'm going to be watching, at least what I can. I'll be watching of the actual meetings. I'm not going to watch their worship of the American flag at the beginning that they do for an hour every meeting. And then they go like, oh, but we're really about God. I'm getting mad. So I'm letting loose a little bit. But like, that's what they do. That's what they do. They get together and they basically worship the United States for an hour, and then they're like, now let's get to Jesus. And what? Jesus said you can't serve two masters. All right. Anyways, let's hop into the penalty box before I get myself into even more trouble. Oh wait.
You want to see a penalty? I'll show you a real penalty. Get out of my face, man.
Okay. All right. Let's see what's in here, and let's try to keep. I'm gonna try. This is gonna be like my Hulk moment, where I can get real mad, or I can learn to be patient. Let's see. Let's see what happens.
And there's a call.
All right. So Mark Driscoll gives masterclass in gaslighting. The Brown family said, so like, I guess this guy speaks for his entire family. So this isn't gaslighting, bro. LOL. First, that's a made up term. I'm not trying to be mean, but every term is a made up term. That's how words work. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. But it's a made up term. Oh man. Second, watching this video, you are adding your emotions to what he is saying. Mark is sharing something that happened in a private meeting. He's saying it happened. Is this the full truth? No idea. But don't add presumptions. That's how words work. Okay, I made fun of him and then I immediately fell on my face. Presumptions to something that isn't there. Well, one, you don't know if it isn't there. So like you're doing the exact same thing that you accused me of. But also, like, look at the track record. Look at how everyone else who knows him is talking about this. Look at what Sutton Turner had to say about these comments that he made. Talk to any of the Marshall elders who were involved in that situation and involved with his process of reconciliation, and they will tell you similar things. But it's a made up term. Gaslighting is made up, so it doesn't matter.
There's the whistle. There's no excuse there. He knows that whistle's been blown.
Mark Driscoll has not changed. I don't know if it was just like the Trinity Church people, not Trinity Bible Chapel, Trinity Church down in Arizona, whether they just started sharing my videos around or what. But Jason Alicia says, hey, big guy. Cool. Hey, big guy, with love. Oh, I'm saying this. Stop being a Karen. Hopefully you can get past the openly biased opinion you have of him. We'd all be better for it. Thank you, and God bless. All right. Don't do that Southern thing. I don't know if you're Southern or not, Jason. But don't do that Southern thing where like, bless your heart at the end. I know what that means. But I lived in the South for a year. I get it. Also, if you're going like anyone who starts off, if you want to make me mad, well, I guess I shouldn't say that because then you'll fuel stuff. I'll just say this. I'm going to keep on being a Karen because by your definition of being a Karen, Jesus was, and he cared about how people talked and how people acted toward each other. And so I'm going to continue to do that. If that bothers you, enjoy your time in the penalty box. Next up.
Following play is under review for a major or match penalty.
This one was just nuts. Okay. So Justin Peters is a fundamentalist was a short because I was talking about, using stuff like this and his opinions on that. And David Sarker says, heck yeah, man. You just stole the words out of my mouth. I do cocaine. So what's wrong with that? God loves me, and that's that. And to HE double hockey sticks with the fundamentalists. Guys, like this is a joke. Like at least I think it's a joke. But this is actually stuff that fundamentalists will say. Like they'll be like, oh, what's next? What's next? They're gonna do cocaine now? Like, what? because we're talking about a glass of whiskey and talking theology with a glass of whiskey. That means that the next thing you're just going to be, making those lines on the mirror and, going at it. Come on. It's ridiculous. It's somewhat funny, but also just like, that's what fundamentalists do. They always go to the extreme things to defend their extreme positions. And it's like, no one does that. No one does that. It's the same thing as like those people who are just like, well, if you have one, what's going to stop you from having 19? It's like, what? Like, wow, why 19? Like, why do you go so far? Well, that's inevitably what will happen. No, it isn't. Like, people do have self-discipline. That is a possibility. Just because fundamentalists have rules so they don't have to exercise self-discipline. And then when those rules are lifted or the restrictions and guidelines of who's watching are gone, they go nuts. Like we've been talking a lot about that lately. I do cocaine. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. That's cool. Cool. Thanks, David. Hope you enjoy your time in the penalty box. All right, guys, that about wraps it up. I got to get going. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me and listening to me rant. It's just, I guess that's what the show has become. It's just become the show where I rant about other things and get even more frustrated with other Christians and how they treat people. And it's just, what is going on? I don't know. Will it ever end? Hopefully the podcast won't. Like we'll keep this thing going, but hopefully people will start behaving a little bit better and stop listening to guys like that. Why? What is it about this guy? You can find stuff that he talks about that are like the few things that are good that he talks about. You can find that in so many other people. Why do you got to do this to yourself? Anyways, I'll see you in the next one.